We saw the horror gaming genre go through the changes as we went from the likes of the Atari and Nintendo all the way to the PlayStation era, where systems went from cartridge to CD medium. This allowed for more diverse worlds of interaction and allowed developers a chance to come close to their true vision of what their game should be like. The horror genre had blossomed from simple gameplay mechanics to point-and-click adventures, platforming, and eventually survival horror. Now let's start with the 6th generation of consoles on what I consider to be an underrated system. Nintendo has never been known for embracing the horror gaming space, so Nintendo did what Nintendo does: innovate. What if they took one of their famous characters off of one of their family-friendly titles and injected him into a horror-type setting? The result? Luigi's Mansion, an underrated game that was released as a launch title for the GameCube. Mario was now the one needing the rescue. It was the first time Luigi would headline a game title for a Nintendo console launch. Now, is this game scary? No, not even close. But it is a very well-detailed haunted mansion type game with plenty of side characters to keep the story interesting. Don't be fooled by the childlike take on the overall game. This right here is a very solid title from start to finish. One of the reasons why I consider the GameCube to be underrated is the game. Capcom specifically partnered with Nintendo and would release what is known as the Capcom 5. One of the 5 games to be released for the GameCube was Resident Evil 4. When the original Resident Evil was released a couple of years earlier, it popularized survival horror as a whole. With Part 4, Capcom took that formula and mixed it with that of a fast action third-person shooter. The result was one of the best GameCube titles on the platform. Up to Code Veronica, the series had the isometric tank-like controls and camera views, opting for a slower-paced survival experience. With Part 4, however, this was completely scrapped in favor of an over-the-shoulder action-style horror shooter. Now throw in some well-placed action segments, a bit of QuickTime events, and a side game that allow you to play as various characters inside a closed arena by ramping up the survival aspect, and you had yourself one of the best Resident Evil games ever, with plenty of replay value to keep you coming back for more. But hold on a second, we are not done with the GameCube yet. Silicon Knights released a very underrated game that flew under the radar of many gamers out there, myself included. Eternal Darkness: Sanity's Requiem was not only a game, but an actual experience. The developers did this by incorporating many features that were not specifically relatable to what was happening on the screen, but affected the person playing it. The result was that the player questioned his or her own sanity. And how was this done exactly? Well, using the following techniques: pretending to erase your memory cards, lowering your volume, muting your volume, residual noises, things on the screen that should not be there, in-game clipping, items in the menu suddenly disappearing. I mean, this game really messes with you as you play it, and you start to question at some point if it's the game or is it you. Silicon Knight took the psychological aspect and took it one step further than any game before it. The game also utilizes a sanity meter on your in-game character, affecting how he or she interacts with the environment and the enemies. Truly innovative. Silicon Knights took another step forward in the genre by introducing a more interactive experience that was still fresh and entertaining for its time. I know I mentioned Silent Hill on my last video, but Part 2 is such a psychological horror ride and is so well put together. that I just couldn't ignore it. It was originally a PS2 exclusive and got a port on the Xbox, which was the new kid on the block back then. That port had extra content not found on the PlayStation 2 port and was subtitled Restless Dreams.
This town, there's something wrong with it. It's kind of hard to explain, but...
Is it dangerous?
Maybe. And it's not just the fog either.
Okay, I got it. I'll be careful.
The game had you in control of James Sunderland, who travels to Silent Hill after receiving a letter from his wife, who has been deceased for a few years already. The rest of his quest has him not only dealing with some of the most disturbing creatures among the darkness and eerie spots in town, but you had to deal with Pyramid Head, a physical form of his inner guilt. This title had a total of 6 endings, depending on what choices were made during gameplay. Silent Hill 2 is also a worthy successor to that game that introduces all to one of the most disturbing towns to ever grace the video game landscape. The journey is harrowing, and the story is a reminder of what sort of personal hell we all have the power to conjure within our minds. The 6th generation gave us some action-packed horror games and introduced interesting mechanics such as the sanity meter, a feature that we will see again later on in this video. The 7th generation introduced some unique games with interesting stories as well as incorporating horror into other genres, as seen with our first game right here. Fear took the very popular first-person shooter formula and injected it with a creepy story about an assault recon team that comes into contact with a hostile, paranormal entity during their mission. The action here is periodically interrupted by disturbing hallucinations from this paranormal entity, which slowly starts to unwind a complicated backstory. The game incorporated a bullet time mechanic that allowed the player to slow down time in very short spurts. The horror-inspired storyline coupled with fast-action gameplay and advanced enemy AI gave us gamers a memorable franchise that would spawn 5 more titles after this one. This next title took on the format of a television series, clearly a result of the inspiration set by Twin Peaks. Remedy Entertainment wanted to branch away from the popular Max Payne series and came up with the concept of a writer trying to survive in the town of Bright Falls, as his creations come alive, placing him and all others in the town in great peril. Lighting here would play a huge factor at how the player not only interacts with the environments, but for enemies as well. The story is played out as if watching a television series, each chapter broken into seasons and introduced as such. The game is heavily inspired by not only Stephen King himself, but his writings as well. Remedy Entertainment had initially pushed for the idea of having the game released as actual television seasons every year, but publisher Microsoft pushed back, preferring the entire game to be sold on physical media and at once. Alan Wake allowed horror fans and gamers all around to experience Bright Falls with the pacing and format of a TV show, with additional DLC made available soon after. TV and games had come together here wonderfully, a format that we would see again but reversed years later with the release of Bandersnatch on Netflix.
That's just crazy talk, Al. Al? We should go to the sheriff or call the FBI.
Damn it, Barry, they'll kill her! This is not a goddamn debate, Barry. I'm going to Lover's Peak. He said to come alone.
Okay then. I understand. You're my best friend, and I'm worried that you're not right in the head. Tell me what to do to help, and I'll do it.
You stay here, and if I'm not back by morning, call the cavalry.
Catherine is a title that was released in 2010 for the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360. Now, if you've never heard of the title, don't be surprised. It was a small hit upon release. But the gameplay is mainly aimed at adults and dealt with an insight to the mind and madness of the protagonist that is told via a romantic, horror-themed story. The title was controversial for its time for reasons I will not get into here. But if you're looking for a title that is, how should I say this, different, combines horror and romance and places you in a puzzle-style gameplay segment, look no further than Catherine. It managed to combine all these tropes effectively and in the process delivered one of the most unique titles of the 7th generation. So where would the horror genre go from here? So what if we took the idea of Event Horizon, a movie that came out in 1999, which combined sci-fi and horror, and we made a game around that idea? Well, Dead Space is the result. Now, if you like horror, if you like gore, if you like space, if you like guns, you can't go wrong with this title that was developed by Visceral Games and released in 2008.
Run, Isaac! Get the hell out of there!
Scarce ammo, limited visibility, tight spaces and corridor all add to the heightened atmosphere. Horror returned to the sci-fi genre and in the process went on to spawn a few more titles. The 7th generation ended with a bang with the release of The Last of Us. Naughty Dog knows how to make good games and this title was almost perfection. A linear cinematic experience with enough action to stand up against any first-person shooter, but at a pacing that allows you to soak up the atmosphere and detail locations that were so meticulously crafted like only Naughty Dog can.
Was that everything you hoped for?
Jury's still out. But man, can't deny that view.
Come on, this way. Hey, let's pick it up.
This masterpiece was released in 2014 to glowing reviews and praises across the gaming industry. Having to trek through a landscape filled with zombies and creatures right out of a horror book is bad enough, but doing so while trying to keep a young girl alive was not an easy task, but it sure was addictive. By the way, if you haven't seen the HBO series yet, do yourself a favor and give it a watch. It did the game justice from start to finish.
Well, we seem to be doing all right so far.
And now you'll be doing even better with Tommy.
Not her, you know.
What?
Maria told me about Sarah.
Ellie?
And
You are treading on some mighty thin ice here.
I'm sorry about your daughter, Joel. But I have lost people too.
You have no idea what loss is.
Over on the PC side, that same year, a small indie title by the name of Five Nights at Freddy's would make waves across the gaming community, thanks in part to some popular YouTubers bringing it into the spotlight. It introduced a stationary style of horror approach. What if you had to stay in place, watching slowly as animatronics coming to life came for you in the middle of the night? You had to survive 5 nights, from midnight to 6 AM to beat the game. Sure, the gameplay is repetitive, but its main goal of creating a tense and frightening atmosphere is successfully done as you fight to maintain an eye on the various animatronics while conserving energy for your equipment and watching the clock wind down. That level of urgency coupled with jump scares is what made this game successful. The franchise, as of the making of this video, sits at 15 games total, counting spin-offs as well. Fans were also treated to the announcement of a full feature film that was finally released on October 27th of 2023 after spending many years in development limbo. The 8th generation began with a teaser, but it was brought to us by the great Hideo Kojima and the talented director Guillermo del Toro. The game, or rather teaser trailer, was just identified by 2 letters, P and T. This game placed you inside a home with no backstory, no explanation, and as you walk down the corridor, you realize something was just not right. The corridors loop, but the experience slowly changes from quiet to unsettling to disturbing. Kojima wanted to create a suspenseful horror experience devoid of much violence and pure gore. Although there are some scenes with blood, they are few. The true experience lies in the psychological impact on the player. In the end, we find out that it was a teaser for Silent Hills, a game that would ultimately be cancelled after Kojima and Konami had a falling out. But the short trailer had a major impact before and after being delisted on the PlayStation Network. It opened the floodgates for a new take on horror gaming, similar to what Silicon Knights had done just a bit over a decade earlier. The psychological approach would crop up in many games since PT was shown. This version that you see right here was created by Kismar using the Unreal 4 engine. Unfortunately, he was presented with a cease and desist letter from Konami, but thanks to the impact of PT, the psychological horror genre has only grown stronger and is alive and well as of 2023. Dead by Daylight brought a fresh spin to the horror genre. Teamwork survival horror. It wasn't the first time this was done, with Left 4 Dead being one of the first games to introduce teamwork survival, and Hidden from 2005 being a huge influence on its approach. The correct term here, however, the asymmetrical horror game. But Dead by Daylight brought along the boogeyman aspect to the party. Now you can choose what team to play for. You could either play as a survivor or one of the killers. If you choose survivor, you can choose from a large array of characters as you play in a team inside a closed arena, trying to escape while not getting caught by the killer. Playing as the killer, however, you can choose from an assorted bunch of really sadistic creations with special powers. Over the years, Dead by Daylight has added major characters like Freddy Krueger and Michael Myers, to name a few. Friday the 13th would borrow this gameplay style the following year, where you get to play as Jason or one of the counselors as you try to flee Camp Crystal Lake alive. Dead by Daylight continues to be the zenith of asymmetrical horror style games by which all others measure up to, and offered horror fans a new style of gameplay that was fresh and fun. Little Nightmares from 2017 was not the first game to place you in control of a young protagonist in a dark world. Limbo did that in 2010, but this title did so not only in a fully 3D environment but almost fully interactive as well. There is no story here to explain anything. You are a small kid in a yellow raincoat traversing a hostile world while solving puzzles along the way. It was a slow-paced puzzle-solving approach with a really haunting atmosphere and tight gameplay all around. The 8th generation not only offered up some really interesting titles, but we saw the ever-growing impact that indie developers had not only on gaming in general, but in the horror genre. Games like Bendy's Basic, Five Nights at Freddy's, and Bendy in the Ink Machine were some of the more popular entries as more games went for a more psychological approach. But there was another subgenre of horror that had been slowly on the rise: found footage. Blair Witch Project was one of the most popular examples of such an approach, with smaller videos on YouTube like the Bitterroot clip that circulated around 2011. Games like No Players Online in September 1999 played up to this concept. Backrooms: The Lost Tape is a perfect example of this subgenre. The gameplay relies mostly on the player's actual experience and expectations, never knowing when or if something or someone will appear or chase you down inside these dark and somber locations. Visage, released in 2020, was a clear inspiration of PT. Set in a mysterious mansion, the game is divided into different stories with disturbing background details on each of them. Now, if the somber and eerie setting doesn't get under your skin, then the mansion's history and its inhabitants will. The intro alone to this game is extremely disturbing. You will experience their suffering and collapses into madness as the stories are untold in separate chapters. The game also has you seeking light as a refuge. Keeping your sanity meter in check is paramount here. The title, like Silent Hill 2, has multiple endings, all determined by the choices that you make throughout the game. Visage was initially promoted via Kickstarter as a clear tribute to Kojima and PT. The end result is a hauntingly paced horror game that will satisfy those that still feel that itch for a PT-style experience. What if the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise was more open-ended, not tying down the protagonist to a single room? Poppy's Playtime takes inspiration from that franchise and created a fast-paced puzzle horror game where toys are out to kill you while you explore an abandoned toy warehouse. The main villain, Huggy Wuggy, is a thing of terror. There is no gore here, no clear violence, but Poppy's Playtime brought along another angle to the mix that developers were not expecting: social media. There were many rumors and TikTok challenges that were said to be taking place in regards to this title right here. The character himself was said to be causing school children to lose sleep. The game is free to play, but you can add other chapters to the story by downloading and paying for DLC. You have not known fear until you have an 18 or 19 foot whatever the heck he is chasing after you. It is pure adrenaline fun. And there is now talks about a possible film adaptation as well. Phasmophobia was another interesting take on the team survival genre. This title, developed by Kinetic Games and released in 2020, took the ever-growing popularity of ghost hunting TV shows and paired it with a cooperative team approach.
Okay, I've checked the water and it's dirty.
That means we're dealing with either a spirit or a wraith. You're not done yet though. We still need more information.
You could play solo, but the fun starts with playing with others in trying to identify what ghost or evil entity is haunting the location. You can unlock equipment and other perks depending how well you do in collecting information during your missions. The game was a success upon release due to its haunting-like settings and gameplay mechanics.
Your vitals aren't looking good. You need to pack up and leave as soon as you can. You're risking your life from this point on.
The question now is, what is the next step for horror games? VR? Or some new mashup of gameplay styles we've yet to see? The horror genre went from platforming to survival horror, then story-driven games became more prevalent until the psychological approach was spearheaded by PT. Now there is nothing better than experiencing a good scary film or even a game every once in a while. What is it about a great scary flick or experience that entices us to pursue it further? Why is the thrill of it all so intoxicating? What is it about jump scares in the dark that pulls us in? Thanks to the power of gaming consoles and the emergence of VR as the next gaming horizon, gaming in general seems to be ripe with possibilities. I want to thank you all for watching this look at how the horror genre in gaming has slowly changed throughout the years. Hope you all have an awesome Halloween. In the meantime, keep watching, keep gaming, and as always,
sleep with one eye open.